John, thanks for making the trip, man.
Dude, thanks for having me.
So this is kind of a unique podcast. I've interviewed plenty of SEALs. I mean, Jack Carr, Andy Stumpf, but it's a little bit different because at the command level, you do leadership with Echelon Front, but in your military experience, you ran the training detachment that runs Navy SEAL candidates through BUDS, correct?
I ran a phase of that. So BUDS is broken up into 3 separate phases. So for people who don't understand how it works out, 7 months in length, there's very creatively named first phase, second phase, and third phase of BUDS, each of which are about 7 weeks. My third tour, after I did my platoon commander tour, I ran the third phase of BUDS. But I think what you're probably hinting at is my last tour in the Navy, I ran our wartime training command. So we call that Training Detachment 1. So that is the command that's the charter of that command is you're putting all of the SEAL platoons on the West Coast or the East Coast. Tradette 1, West Coast. Tradette 2, East Coast. If you're Tradette 1, your responsibility is to put all of the platoons on the West Coast through their wartime training functions. So land warfare, CQC, SALC or Mount, whatever they want to call it these days, combat diving, taking down ships. That was our responsibility. Another part of my job in the role as the OIC of that, the person running that whole command, is mentorship. So you've got these young, hard-charging leaders coming through at the platoon commander level, which for SEALs is about somewhere between typically your 5 and 7 year mark in the military. Your hallmark tour in the SEAL teams is considered your platoon commander tour.
That's 03?
03.
Yeah.
03. So part of my job was facilitating training, and part of my job was mentoring those young men that were coming through in the platoon commander role and getting them prepared to execute the role of a platoon commander overseas. So, I mean, you literally can't ask for a better job than that. It was amazing.
Yeah, because you're working with a warfighter who's already vetted and
Yes.
they're preparing for war, for a conflict.
100%. And
Yeah.
you've got the gamut of experience in that platoon. You've got, you're putting whole troops through training. So a SEAL troop is typically 3 platoons led by a troop commander who's an 04, usually more seasoned 04, and then an E8, which for us, the Navy has to be special, so we call them senior chiefs. So you've got a senior chief that might have 18 years of experience going through the same blocks of training as a guy who just graduated BUDS. So a brand new guy who's never done anything before. And the goal of that 6 months of training that we ran, that we called unit level training, is to get them all into a cohesive fighting unit and to help them accomplish all of the different, the military calls them medals, mission essential tasking list, all the different tools they needed to deploy. It was our job to train them with all those tools and then get them all to a level where the platoon and the troop is functioning at a very, very high level.
Now, is that taking on both West Coast and East Coast based SEAL teams as well, everybody?
Bifurcated. So
Yeah.
Tradette 1 is only focused on the West Coast, which is where I was. I ran Tradette 1, never did any time on the East Coast, which is pretty normal for guys in the SEAL teams. You typically can stick on whichever coast you want. Tradette 2 runs all of the East Coast training. And I would like to say that we cross-train more than we actually do. When I was there, we did a big push to make sure that the tradettes were on the same page with the tactics we were putting out, and then make sure that we were getting an opportunity to observe their training. They were getting an opportunity to observe our training, and we actually started to utilize some of their training sites to give guys a different look. So just the nature of topography, if you go through land warfare on the West Coast, you're going to Nyland, California, which is literally the desert. And you're going to do all kinds of awesome land warfare training, but it's going to be very desert focused. There's no closed terrain IADs. There's no jungle warfare because there's no jungle out there. It's all open desert. If you go through land warfare on the East Coast, you go to Kentucky. And Kentucky's heavily forested. So we're learning the same basic tactics to deal with the land warfare environment, but the environment is different. So we sent a couple platoons to the East Coast to get experience in more of the jungle type environment. And they would send guys out to the West Coast to get some experience in the desert type environment. So we did start to cross-tell, but I wish I could tell you that we did more of it. We didn't. And we do need to bridge that gap.
It seems like it's a very centralized approach, which I always appreciated about the SEAL teams that I've worked with throughout the years. I mean, as a sergeant major, I try to change a lot of things, including us doing more training detachment led focused, J metal task, and checking those blocks versus really a lot of organizations in the 5 designated SF groups focus on decentralized training where they honestly leave it up to almost to the ODA level of training. And so you're checking the block as a team sergeant, but it doesn't necessarily fit into a J metal task. And then you'll go down range, and then the SEALs, and then the SF, and then MARSOC on 3 different sheets of music. I never really understood that why that is.
Yeah, I would think it's probably because at the end of the day, there's some ego involved in the SOF community, and like Navy SEALs aren't going to listen necessarily. I'm speaking in generalities, right?
It's
Navy
true.
SEALs aren't going to listen to what the SF community has to say.
Yeah.
SF's not going to listen to what Navy SEALs have to say. You know, MARSOC at the time that I was in was the new kid on the block. So we didn't do a lot of cross-tell with each other either. And I think we could have benefited a lot from that mutual learning experience. But something the SEAL teams has always done is held a standardized training to a very, very high regard. Buds. Everybody has to go through buds. Don't care what rank you are. Don't care what race you are, whatever. Everybody goes through the exact same process. Officers enlisted, everybody is treated as an equal officers are treated a little bit more equal because you have a little extra attention on you going through buds, but everybody goes through the same pipeline, the same training, the same selection, and then you get to a team, everybody goes through the same training. And something that our leadership did at the admiral level that I thought was exceptional for us was when the wars were rocking and rolling, there was such a high demand for SOF forces to be in both theaters of conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also the Philippines, Africa, other places, that the leadership at SOCOM and in the DOD at large wanted everyone to deploy more, which means you have to do what? Train less. So our leadership did line in the sand and basically said, the reason you want SEALs is because they're good at what they do, just like the reason you want SF is they bring unique skill sets to bear on the battlefield. If we shorten our training, you're no longer getting the SEALs that you want. So we drew a line in the sand and said, we have an 18-month training cycle and we're not deploying people until that 18 months is over with. 6 of those months are broken up into individual training. So if Mike needs to go get sniper school, that 6 months is his opportunity to go get sniper school. If I need a breacher who's going to learn demo and breaching techniques, that's his time to do that. The next 6 months is what the tradettes ran, which was the unit level training, unit being the troop. Everybody goes through together. And then the last 6 months is your deployment focused training that more like the model of the SF, now the troop controls. So now it's like we gave you the training we needed you to have. Now it's your turn to take those skills that you learned, the foundation in unit level training, and apply them to where you're actually going. So ULT doesn't prepare people for Afghanistan. It prepares people for war. Prepare yourselves for war. Your last 6 months is where you prepare yourself for Afghanistan. You take all the skills that you learned from the previous 12 months and you say, well, I need to go to cold weather, high altitude, whatever the case may be. Or I'm going to go to the Philippines and do a lot of maritime-centered things. I need to do more ship takedowns. I need to do more diving operations. So the last 6 months is tailored towards what the troop really needs it to be focused on deployment. But by drawing that line in the sand, what it allowed us to do was make sure that everybody has the same baseline of training, in theory, as when they go overseas. And I think it's one of the smartest things our leadership ever did was hold the line and just say negative. Like, we're not going to deploy them twice a year. You're going to get them once every 2 years, one team every 2 years. There'll always be SEALs overseas, but it's a 2-year cycle, 18 months of training, 6 months of deployment. And our community's really held training in a very, very high regard, and the amount of resources and time and effort that we pour into training is what makes SOF. Is we select people a little bit differently, but then the real difference is we just get to train a lot more than conventional forces does.
Yeah, I love that cycle that you guys had, because it seemed via the playbook, there was a further time out to your potential rotation to war, but you knew you were getting specialty skills and you were getting qualified and narrowly focused before you went down range. I mean, there's instances where I come back, I spent all my time in the CIF company, but I come back as an assaulter. They want to send me to sniper school. I go to sniper school, and then a day later, I'm deploying to war.
Yeah, man.
And then I go to war. Even my first rotation as a sniper, I wasn't even sniper qualified. Then doing all the things, come back, and our rotation was so aggressive that after 3, 4, 5 rotations, guys were getting burned out.
Absolutely.
And then you were seeing that kind of unfold on the battlefield potentially with mistakes that were being made where dudes were just getting burned out. And some people were self-selecting. They're like, I can't do this. And then it would disrupt the entire flow of those operations because you're like, my cell leader just had to go back to handle family marital issues that he's dealing with because he's rotating 3-4 times in a 2-year period and has no downtime whatsoever.
We've just been burning him out. And the reality of the wars, the war on terror, the global war on terror was just, it was so heavily reliant upon soft, more so than any other conflict we've ever been in. Now, I'm not downplaying the role that conventionals did. The wars are over and lost very quickly if it's just soft forces in there. Like conventional forces carried a very heavy load at the on stages of those conflicts, but we were never used anywhere near as much, we being the soft community, as we have been in the past, 24 years? And the toll on the force while you're learning all of these lessons that only combat teaches. And while the force is very sharp because you've got this constant, theater of armed conflict to deploy to and sharpen your skills and learn different lessons and bring those lessons back and continue to get better and better and better. The toll on the backside is the human toll, which is where people fall out, marriages disintegrate, suicide rates are exponentially higher. But it's just it seemed like at the time the price of doing business was there's work to be done. Guys in our communities are not going to say no for the most part. They're going to ride it until the wheels fall off the bus, basically.
And they do fall off.
Yes, they do.
We'll do a breakout session for you guys on leadership specifically. You could look forward to that next week because obviously somebody here who has a lot of experience in leadership. I also want to ask Sean about what he finds as the best or looks for as the best candidate to be a Navy SEAL, and also having experienced a lot of training current Navy SEALs, what makes the best of the operators from his perspective. We'll do that as a follow-on. Let's talk about how you migrate out of the military and then you get into Echelon Front.
Yeah.
What is Echelon Front? And then what is your relationship specifically with Jocko? How did that whole thing unfold?
Yeah, so Echelon Front is a leadership consultancy. So think of it as a group of individuals who, through our shared background of military, and we're not just military anymore, we have civilians, only ever worked in the civilian sector working for the company as well, but it was basically founded by people that live this very unique experience of seeing leadership principles in a very high stakes, permanent environment, shall we say, on the battlefield. And the reason I say leadership principles on the battlefield is leadership is the same regardless of what arena you put it in. If you talk about leadership in the business world, it's the same thing. Keeping things simple, building relationships, detaching from our emotions so we're making good decisions. That's the same thing that leads to success in the business world. The reality of the battlefield is just that things happen faster, and the reality is they're more final. If things go wrong, the results are more final. So taking their experience, Jocko and Leif, who started Echelon Front, took their experience and basically crafted it into an organization called Echelon Front, where they could then go and teach people that have never had that experience before these traits and how to best be a leader, regardless of your role, because you can be a leader in a company and not have a title or a position or a rank whatsoever. So the goal of Echelon Front is basically to teach as many people as we possibly can what it means to be a good leader and what it means to be a good teammate. So very fortunately for me, when I was running Tradet, Echelon Front had been in business now for probably 5 or 6 years, very well established. And, Jocko had put me through my first ULT. He was actually running Tradet at the time. Leif was my first leadership instructor in the SEAL community. So I was not a SEAL yet. I was going through BUDS. And after you graduate BUDS, which is the initial selection pipeline, if you're an officer, you have to go through what's called the junior officer training course, where they're separating you from, hey, you survived BUDS. Great. We know that you have at least physically and mentally the tools we're looking for. But now, as someone who's going to fall instantly into a leadership position, this junior officer training course was meant to give us the skills that we needed leadership-wise to not be a liability during our first tour, to actually show up and be able to contribute to the mission of our first platoons, because we were going to be expected to take an active leadership role. Leif was my instructor for that course. So I had a little bit of a relationship with them, and we were talking about myself coming on board with Echelon Front, and we had it all lined up to do that. And then my best friend in the teams, Garrett Moore, who now started a company called Agoras. It's a construction technology company. At the same time, he was talking to me about helping him start this business up. And I was kind of already committed to Echelon Front, so I called Jocko up and just said, hey, my friend wants me to help him start this up. I think it's a unique experience to start something new. And Jocko was like, you don't got to say anything else, man. Like, you would be stupid to not go do that. Go do that, however long you want. Learn some skills in the business world as well, and then you're just more of an asset to me when you come back to Echelon Front. So he's like, I'm here, man. Just come here when you want to come here. So I worked with Garrett for 2 years, and then part of our reasoning, my wife and I's reasoning for getting out of the military was we just didn't want to be in California anymore. You can't have land. Everybody's on top of each other. There was no family there for us, so we wanted to make a move out of California, and the company was going to keep us in California. So I told Garrett, I'll give you 2 years in the COO role, and then I'm rolling out. So at the 2-year mark, just called Jocko up and said, hey, and he's like, cool, man, let's go. So I literally took the construction tech hat off one day and then put on the black polo of Echelon Front the next day and got to join the Echelon Front team, which has just been the greatest job you can have. I mean, you're going around meeting just amazing Americans, and actually not just Americans now, it's a global company, and teaching them how to be more effective leaders and teaching them how to be better teammates. And you know the deal. If your leader is a good leader, everybody's life is better. And if your leader is not a good leader, everybody suffers. So we get to go around and teach people different skills, some additional tools to help them be more effective leaders, which in turn means everybody on the team now has a better situation that they're in. So it's very, very rewarding. And I'm very fortunate to be a part of the team.
Yeah, it's interesting how civilians don't really get or glean from an experience in building out what this idea of leadership means, because a lot of the roles and responsibilities in business kind of disassociate that path as something that you get based on your duty and responsibility that's designated. And we learn even from a younger enlisted perspective or even younger officer perspective of how important it is to be an informal leader, to take charge when not in charge, and to keep things together. And there's a whole bunch of attributes that you gain from a military experience, including being in a designated role, taking some of those skill sets. And like my first leadership gig was at Oracle, and the things I was adapting wasn't even military strategy and leadership. It was kindergarten strategy and leadership. Like, hey, like you guys should use stars to actually account. You guys are using a construction paper like this big. Why don't you put that on a display screen and use like graphics of horses or something to breed this competitive mindset? You guys are using glitter stars on construction paper. It just doesn't make sense. You want to advance it. And they were like, what? Yeah, like different color shirts for team building, different color badges because you've named the teams, but you don't have any branding associated with the esprit de corps and affiliation of a team. And they're like, oh my God, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, what? But it's interesting how that sector, those sectors of industry really will take a lot from these experiences. And there's a whole bunch of tool sets and skill sets they can learn and adopt and adapt to their corporate position, right?
Yeah, and something that you just hit on, I think is a really important thing to camp out on for a second, which is anybody on the team can and should be leading at different times. And I'm sure you had the same experience as a sergeant major, but during my career, I had the opportunity to go on over 200 combat operations. Probably 140 of those I was the ground force commander for, which means the person in charge of the operation. So I don't know how many hours that equates to, but let's say it's like 1,000 hours of combat operations, probably somewhere in there. Of that 1,000 hours, I might have been actively leading for maybe like 100 hours. And during the rest of that 900 hours, I'm not the one that's on the ground seeing things that are unfolding, because as a leader, I have to be in a position where I can make comms with the overhead elements, the jets, the helicopters, where I can see everything that's going on. I might have to move to a point of friction that's going on over here. But during those operations, am I overall in charge? 100%. Am I making every decision? No. like very rarely was I actually making decisions, because my guys that were involved in the problems they were facing were the ones that were making those decisions. And my role became to support. Hey, Mike, what do you need? Mike's like, cool. Hey, I'm on the ground. I got this going on. I need you to kick me a section of F-18s. Awesome. Coming your way. So even though I was overall in charge, I'm being influenced by my people on the ground all the time. And that's one of the biggest things that we try to get people to understand as a company is leadership's not a title. It's not a position. It's not a rank. All leadership is the ability to influence somebody else. And you don't need a title to be able to influence people. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that as someone that served some time in the military, you probably met some people that had some rank on their shoulder that probably didn't have a whole lot of influence with you, Mike. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise for me. And then I met a lot of people who were new guys who had a tremendous amount of influence on me because they were good teammates. They cared. They were sharp. They had good ideas. So all that means is if you can influence people, you can be a leader. You don't have to have a title. And as a leader, you need to be able to take a step back and actually listen to what your people are saying. That's how you get to be good at your job. And anytime when I was a little bit older in my career and I had experience and I would talk to the younger guys coming up in the communities, some of the questions they might ask would be like, hey, how do you be a good leader in the SEAL teams? And it's like, it's easy. You're given a troop of really hard charging, capable people. Just don't get in their way. Enable them. Don't get in their way. Facilitate them. Step back. They're going to make you look really good. It's really easy. It's the more that you feel the need to step on people's toes and shut people down and control everything, that's when you actually start to become ineffective as a leader.
I love that, man. Echelon Front, I assume that's like a thing you could tie in via a website, like you can go sign up for it or your corporation signs up for it?
Yeah, so if you go to echelonfront.com, there's so much information there. There's web courses, there's free courses, there's the online academy where Jocko and Leif are getting on there once or twice a week and just talking about a broad subject with whoever wants to hop on. There's the opportunity for consultants like myself to come and work with your company directly, but all of that is funnels through the Echelon Front website.
Okay. So you're wearing two hats. I mean, technically your first hat as a SEAL was just good hair.
100%.
You guys don't wear hats.
You said what makes a good SEAL. I was going to say it's 100% the hair.
Abs and good hair. The second hat you were wearing was with Echelon Front, and you've picked up a third hat, a cowboy hat. I've seen you wear a cowboy hat.
Yes.
And where does that come from? I grew up in North Carolina. I got some roots in country. That's my lifestyle. You put on a cowboy hat and you're doing something with a beef kind of deal. What's going on there?
Yeah. So when we got out of California, we moved to a place in Virginia, right in the middle of the Shenandoah Valley, because that's where my goodness, man, it's amazing. Yeah. We have the Blue Ridge Mountains on both sides of us. The Shenandoah River runs right through the middle of our town. My personal property, has a couple of small tributary creeks that feed directly into the river. I mean, it's insanely
good soil.
Gorgeous. Amazing soil. So we moved out there because my wife's family over the course of about the last 10 years had been slowly migrating there kind of one by one. And she's one of 8, comes from a big family, which is awesome. And like half her family now lives in this town. So it became the natural point for us to go so that our kids could have the grandparents, the cousins, the aunts and uncles, all of those things that we didn't have when we were in, San Diego. So we moved out there. We have a small farm. It's about 55 acres, very reminiscent of how I grew up. So I grew up small town, Texas, kind of actually in the middle of nowhere on 57 acres. And we had a small farm. Parents raised all kinds of stuff, man. I don't know what they were doing half the time, but we had horses, we had sheep, we had goats, we had emus at one point in time. Like there was just like Dr. Doolittle running around. So I had some experience in what life on a farm was like. And if you asked me as a kid if I enjoyed it, I would have said, hell no, I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the land. I didn't enjoy the responsibilities that came with the land, feeding the animals before school, taking care of them after school, stuff on the weekends, repairing fences because a horse ran through it, whatever the case may be. But now as an adult, you realize just what an awesome life that was. So we wanted to give our kids, and I have 5 kids as of now, the opportunity to have kind of that same existence. So we moved out there. I have a small personal herd of Angus cattle, anywhere between 23 and like 35, depending upon how many calves we're carrying. But one of my friends from that town, a guy named Paul, who's one of the founders of Primal Beef with me, I bought a cow from him because he has a beef business. So had the cow, bought the full cow, cooked up the first steaks, and I looked at my wife and I said, babe, this is literally the best steak I've ever had in my entire life. And as a family of 7, we ate that cow very quickly, and I ordered another cow, and it was the exact same experience. So it wasn't a fluke. Whatever was going on this farm was producing the best beef that I've ever had. So I started talks with Paul and my brother Declan, who lives in Front Royal, my hometown, about starting this beef business and taking it nationwide versus being selfish and just keeping it to ourselves in our hometown. So about that same time, I hit Jocko up, and he was like, 100%, let's do this thing. And that was kind of the genesis of Primal Beef. So all of our beef comes from this one farm right in our hometown. And what that really translates to is super high quality beef and consistency. So every single box that you order from Primal Beef, every steak, you know it's going to be the exact same experience. Whereas if I go to my grocery store, those steaks are coming from all over the place, to include overseas. If I go to some of the other competing companies that are doing good work and getting farms, Americans access to farm-raised beef, but they're doing it from lots of different farms. So I might order a box in January and I might really love it. And then I order a box in February, and it's a little bit different because it came from a whole different section of the country, basically. So we hang our hats on being able to provide people with what we think is the highest quality, all natural, no hormones, none of that nonsense beef that's raised by a farmer right there in the Shenandoah Valley. And every cow that we have is raised the exact same way, which means your experience is going to be the exact same every single time.
Yeah, man. I've had your beef. I've had Jeff from Colorado Craft. I know this. I've podcasted a guy, I think it's AJ, who's putting together this app to make it easier for ranchers and farmers in their local areas to connect with clients.
That's awesome.
This whole synergy of this world is making it more affordable, but also more likely that people will wake up to the fact that the food they're getting from their local Walmart, their local Costco, they don't know where it comes from. And the quality of you guys, like I just fed some SWAT guys, Greg, Mike Pfeiffer from Last Line of Defense, and Pete from Origin at my house, Primal Beef.
Oh, hell
And
yeah.
everybody was like, whoa, like this is good. I had elk on one plate and then from a cow tag that I filled in Wyoming, and I had that beef. I don't feed my kids anything that I haven't harvested myself or I know exactly where it came from. And then 2, sharing that experience is the experience buffer for like, man, I can't provide enough harvested meat for family and friends. My family exclusively is getting harvested meat. My kids will eat mule deer or elk every single morning. But I could partition that with beef from you guys, and that allows me to kind of like share in it, but also tell the story. It's like, you know where this came from. And that's important to me because I don't want to be eating meat that I don't know where it comes from. And I've talked to Jeff about it. I've talked to AJ about it. That whole story will scare the hell out of you and make you just buy, focal pointed meat from Primal or from Colorado Craft because you don't want to ever eat anything else. Hey guys, if you know Fieldcraft Survival, if you know Mike Force, if you know me, then you likely know about Montana Knife Company. Montana Knife Company was founded by a buddy of mine, Josh Smith, master bladesmith for 30 years. One of the most experienced knife makers in the country, and he's had no compromise and all the integrity because he's making all of his knives. He's made that decision early on, by the way, to make all of his knives made in the USA, manufactured locally in his home state of Montana. Designed, tested, and built by hunters, Montana Knife Company is a hunting knife company first and foremost. Likely the sharpest knives in the market. I mean, you likely need a bleeding control kit if you're going to own a Montana knife, and that's a good problem to have. They sell out instantaneously. But for the first time in the history of his company, because he's gotten ahead, he has stock of your favorite knives, including the Blackfoot 2.0, the Speedgoat, or the Stonewall Skinner. And you could save 10% by using MF10. That's Mike Foxtrot 10, MF10 for 10% off your first order at montanaknifecompany.com.
Yeah, and I can tell you where the beef on those shelves come from for the most part. They're either coming from one of 4 companies that now control basically all of the beef in the United States of America, or it's coming from overseas. And we import as a country that was more or less fed by beef throughout our existence, as far as, Revolutionary War post, cattle have played a huge part in the American history. And the amount of beef that we import from overseas is kind of unexcusable for a country that has the resources that we have. And there was just a report that came out, and I was reading up on it last week, that we're at a historic low for cattle production in the United States. And by that, what they mean is there's less cattle in the United States now than there has been in the last, I think they said 60 years. Because, of course, if you go back 100 years, there's less people, there's less farmers, there's less cows. But from the industrialized portion on, we're at an all-time low for cattle production. And there's lots of different overlaying factors on that. There's a lot of policies now that make it really hard for these ranchers to actually make a living off of raising cattle. The average age of a farmer/rancher in the United States now is mid-60s, because what it used to be is Mike was a rancher, Mike has kids. Guess who can't wait to take over the family ranch? The kids take over the family ranch, and it becomes this generational tradition, and that's not happening anymore.
No.
So the kids aren't taking it over. So our experience level, all the expertise, the knowledge of what it takes to do that effectively is going away. So something has to change. And that report, really gave me a little bit of a pause, because there's no reason for it. There's absolutely no reason for it. There's plenty of people out there that if they were given the opportunity to know where their beef came from, they would jump at that opportunity. And that's one of the bridges that we're trying to gap for people is, look, you can go into your store and you can buy beef. Awesome, great. Or you can take a more tailored approach like what we offer, which is hop on the website, order what you want, and you can feel good all the way around about that, because you know how the cattle were raised, how the cattle were treated, what was fed that cattle, what it wasn't given, the hormones, the antibiotics, the mRNA, all those other things. How it was processed and the people that processed it. That it was dry aged so that the flavor is enhanced, all these different things. And then for us specifically, that if you place an order from us, not only are you feeding your family, your friends, super high quality American beef that's sole sourced from one farm in the Shenandoah Valley, you're also giving beef directly to special operations forces through our partnership with the C4 Foundation. So anytime anybody buys a box of beef, we set aside a cut of beef that we donate to the C4 Foundation. And we've been doing this since we became live, if you will, as a company in August. So we've only been doing it for about 7 months now. And so far, we've donated over 1,500 pounds of beef to SEALs through the C4 Foundation. So that's over 5,500 meals that our customers have been able to provide for these SOF operators who are doing, so much good for our country. And I say they provide it because they make the purchase, but they're not paying for it. We're not like hiding the cost of that cut in the box for them. That's coming out of my pocket, Declan's pocket, Paul's pocket, and Jocko's pocket every single time. And we couldn't be more happy to do it. So you can go buy some beef off your local butcher shelf or Walmart shelf. Cool, go do that. Or, find a farmer, build a relationship with them, come to primalbeef.com and know the entire story of how that cow was raised, and then know all the good that you're doing for not only farmers, for your family, for your friends health-wise, but also on the backside, the good that you're doing as well.
It's incredible mission to be able to give back like that. I never even thought that was something that you could do. Smart in that tactic as well, because it's like you're always giving back. You're going to take cuts of it. I talked to Greg from Little Belt Cattle Co., who's also a SEAL. Great dude. I've moved cattle with him out on his ranch, and it was a great experience. He feeds a lot of people in Bozeman because he provides that meat direct to consumer through some of the local shops. And we're talking prime cuts. I mean, he's got some good prime cuts. But I imagine part of the problem could be a demand and supply issue, because when you do good at what you're doing in business, you create this demand signal. Well, it's a double-edged sword because it puts you in a dilemma. Like, how do we scale? How do we grow? And part of the cool thing I think about the uniqueness of these fire bases of ranches operating and spreading the love throughout the country is that now you have more options. But what do you do when you get capped? What do you do? How do you scale beyond that?
So right now we've got the ability with just our Angus cattle from our farm to do about 100 cows a week forever, which 100 cows a week is a lot of beef. And I'd like to tell you we're at 99, but we're not. We're nowhere near that right now. So we have a lot of runway to grow before we have to face that problem. There's always the option of expanding that operation. And then there's always the option of there's plenty of great farmers that are out there pouring their heart and soul into the beef that we could partner with to help
start pulling them in.
Start pulling them in.
Yeah.
There's pluses and minuses to that. I love the fact that we stand on the fact that we're single sourced so that you know exactly what you're getting when you order from us, and we control the quality that goes into that box. The risk when you start to open up to doing more of a conglomeration and bringing in different, good farmers is the customer's experience is different now. There's pluses and minuses to it both. There's ways we can grow organically. There's also a way where something that I've thought about pretty heavily that I haven't really brought up before, except for to with my founding team, is there's a lot of people in the military that are getting out of the service and don't really have a mission. And how cool would it be to have some type of program through, Primal, where we're not there yet, but this is, what I've been thinking through these iterations of, I get a guy or gal that comes out of the military that really wants to just have that lifestyle of the farm and the ranch. Well, we know we need cattle. We know how to raise cattle. We know how to make sure that what the end consumer taste is the exact same, because you can control the grass they're grazing, the fruit that we finish it on, all that stuff. We can more or less control those factors. So it's possible for us to replicate the scenario on our farm for other farmers as well. And how cool would it be to be able to give people coming out of the military a new mission where it's like, hey, if this is what you want to do, we'll help you. We'll help you and we'll be your customer. You raise the beef, we need more beef. You raise it following this methodology, and we'll buy all the cows that come off of your farm.
Yeah, that's a dream job.
Yeah.
Revenue ready, and then you basically are creating an action arm for Primal Beef.
100%.
Oh, man.
I should probably say I'm trademarking that idea right here.
Yeah, I know, right? That's a real cool thing, because then you're essentially building fire bases and extending your capability, but empowering the people who run the operation to live that lifestyle, and then they have the recipe to the madness.
100%. And giving them the mentorship that they need to get past the hurdle of the initial, which is learning to farm.
Yeah.
Like, I grew up on a farm, and, going back to the farm life, there's a lot of lessons that I either forgot or just never knew. So being able to do all of those things, but then also have a mentorship program where you're helping them navigate that initial transition from no farming experience to knowing how to run a farm, basically.
Yeah, I have a hobby homestead, and I thoroughly enjoy it, but it's a lot of work. And out of all the work I've done, likely besides killing bad guys, the most fulfilling, because it's yours, and you're building out stuff that you're feeding from that field or from that farm to the dinner table.
Yeah,
that's it. That's an important component to getting that fulfillment back post the military career.
100%. And the family unit is involved if you have a family. So most of my kids, I have 3 boys and then 2 girls are my youngest. And most of them grew up in Southern California and then came to the farm life. My youngest daughter, when we moved, was very young. She was about almost 2 years old. So her only memories are being on the farm, and she is the quintessential farm girl.
That's awesome.
Like, she's out, if you can't find her, she's out there in the pasture with the chickens that are running around. She's trying to find eggs or catch chickens. If I go out in the wintertime to put out hay, because obviously in Virginia in the winter, there's no grass growing, so the cattle have to eat the hay that we have produced. I fire the tractor up. I'm like, I'm not going unless she's there, because she won't let me. She has to go everywhere. So you're getting to provide for your family, but then you're also getting them absorbed in this amazing lifestyle of getting to be more one with nature than you are if you just live in a city, which is no fault of people that live in a city. It's just not really an option for you.
Primal Beef, such a good name too.
That was
that name.
The single.
Can't believe it's not taken.
I was blown away, but that was the single hardest thing that we had to decide as a company. The 4 of us, we could not decide on. I should say the 3. Jocko didn't care. He's like, pick a name. The 3 of us could not come up with a name that we agreed on. We loved the Shenandoah Cattle Company, but then no one knows how to spell. I lived there. I don't know how to spell it half the time.
You have to abbreviate that.
Yeah. So
Shen.
like the Shen cat, the SCC, which then again, like you got so many SCCs. So Paul one day said, "Hey, what about Primal Beef?" And we were all kind of like, "Yeah,
But that's
what
got to
about
be
Primal
taken.
Beef? It's got to be taken." We got on the interwebs wide open, and I was talking with someone who was potentially interested in becoming a partner in it to begin with, that we just didn't come to terms on it. And he was like, "How the hell did you get Primal Beef?"
It's not taken?
Not taken.
But it's not. Was the domain available?
Yes.
What?
Yes. Yeah.
What?
Crazy.
I just signed a contract for my book, my second book.
Congrats.
Thank you. It was a 2-book deal, and the second book is going to be called Primal Reset.
Oh, hell yeah.
And it has to do with getting back to basics, and a lot of the things that we're talking about, like, building back self-reliance, or as much self-reliance as you can, because we've outsourced everything so much in the name of efficiency.
Convenience.
Yeah, convenience. It's like, how convenient is it?
Yeah.
Really, when your cell phone gets shut down and you can't call 911.
Yeah. Yeah. Which happened, like, what was it, last week?
Last week.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I travel with a sat phone just because I always want to be able to make calls if I need to. And I bounce around to some pretty rural areas with Echelon Front, working with construction companies that are moving big earth and stuff in rural areas. So I always have it with me. And I was starting to think, do I really need to bring this sat phone with me everywhere? And then last week I was like, yes, I do have this sat phone with me.
Well, it's interesting because now the landline thing is kickstarting, because a lot of elderly people need copper wire ran because they don't know how to interact with wireless.
Yeah.
They forget to charge it. When you're in your 80s, it's a difficult thing versus just picking up something they've been used to since their origin story.
Or in your 40s, I can't ever remember to keep my phone charged half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I went through that dilemma last night. But I was glad it happened. I'm like, oh, the phone's dead.
Fine with
off.
me.
I'm off the business line.
Yeah.
And then also, I just heard this morning, but there's a big fear of us going to war potentially with China because of Taiwan. I mean, if China invades Taiwan, we will be in a very icky situation, because we obviously have positioned politically that Taiwan is a no-go criteria for this relationship with China. And then if we even institute any kind of what are they called when you stop dealing with the host nation,
like an embargo or an
embargo
sanctions
or sanction, then you're basically just crippling yourself, because we're so dependent. Do you know any of the stats percentage-wise of how much meat that we're leaning on other countries to provide? I know there's like Brazil and South America. There's a couple countries.
Australia, New Zealand. A lot of our grass-fed. If you're getting grass-fed beef from a grocery store, it's probably coming from, like, 90% chance it's coming from either New Zealand or Australia.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how long? I imagine that's got to be a long time. They're not flying that in an airplane.
No, it's coming over probably on, I would imagine, a container ship, frozen. And beef can stay frozen for over a year very easily if everything is processed right. But the reason for that, the reason given for that at least, is it takes longer to raise cattle on all beef because they're not putting on as much weight. So if you're feeding it corn or something, you can put on hundreds of pounds on a steer in a matter of months. If you're all grass-fed, you have to have a longer period of time that you carry that cow to get them to weight, but you also have to have a lot more land, because what these big conglomerations are doing, of the beef conglomerations, are they have these feedlots where they're just packing like standing room only cattle, and they're just feeding them all day long because they don't need grass. They're eating corn and whatever other stuff they're
eating.
Get
them fat and heavy, then slaughter
them. Get them fat, heavy, slaughter them. If you're grass raising them for all of their diet, you have to have a ton of land. It's because they have to move around. The grass has to grow back. You have to rotate them through, and it just takes longer to get them there. So the American model, except for farmers basically, has gotten away from grass-fed. So almost all of our grass-fed beef, unless you're buying it from your farmer, your local farmer, or like White Oak Pastures or Joel Salatin's farm or someplace like that, if you're going to a grocery store, overwhelmingly odds are it's coming from either New Zealand or Australia.
Now, how do you, like, when you have a rancher who's cutting you cattle, I talked to Greg about this and I still don't understand it. they already have a certain percentage of their cattle already segmented to the big four the companies. And how do you convince them to turn out that specific cattle for a direct-to-consumer model like Primal Beef?
Yeah. Our rancher was not giving any to the big four. He was very much a local rancher, big local rancher.
Got it.
But that's a great question. I think what you have to do is you have to incentivize it. I don't know that many ranchers want to do that. And I'm not trying to speak for all ranchers because I'm not all ranchers.
Greg said the same. Jess said the same.
I don't think they want to.
Yeah. It's easier just to, the truck comes up, picks them all up, and then heads out, right?
Being a rancher is hard.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest things that you can do, especially now that there's all this stuff surrounding green and all these different policies that are coming down from our governmental agency level that's making it very more difficult for them to actually make a living. So these cattle conglomerates can capitalize on that by making it very easy for them. I'll come and I'll buy every cow that you have. Now, what they're not doing is they're not paying them top dollar for their cows. They're saying there's a convenience fee. I'm going to buy 300 cows from you each month. You're going to give it to me at this price. The farmer's like, well, no, I'm going to give it to you for this price. And they're like, no, you're going to give it to me for that price.
Wow.
So it's a convenience thing that I don't think they want to be in. But again, generalities, right? Most ranchers, they love the process of raising the beef, not so much the process of trying to sell the beef. Look, we've been doing this for 6 months. It's hard. It's hard to get your name out there, to get your brand out there, to get awareness enough out there to sell all the cattle that you have. So if this farmer goes and doesn't sell the number of cows that he or she needs to a month, that cost hits them astronomically. So it's just convenience. They make it very easy for them to do it. But I bet if we gave them a better way of doing things, they would 100% be on board with that.
Yeah, especially a good demand signal. So if you're listening to this podcast and you pick up your beef from a local market and it's not, you don't know where it comes from, then I always ask you please to entertain the option of actually looking at the websites across the spectrum. We've got the ones I know about that I'm personal friends with all the guys is Colorado Craft out of Colorado, Greg's Little Belt Cattle Co. out of near Bozeman, and Little Belt Cattle Co. and then Primal Beef out of Virginia. Where can guys go pick up some beef?
Primalbeef.com. That easy.
That easy.
Yep. We're in the process right now of, you won't notice anything if you go to the website, but we're revamping the website to make it a little bit more user-friendly and give the user more tailored options, because one of the principles of leadership that we like to teach from Echelon Front and in our military backgrounds is simple. Keep things very simple. So we wanted to keep things very simple to start with. So we have a curated boxes that you can basically order. The new website is going to give people the ability to build their own box, to do add-ons. We would love to do that right this very second, but our old website just won't let us do it, basically. So we said, screw it, scrap the website. We're probably 2 to 3 weeks out of the new website. It'll still be primalbeef.com. Just if you go now and then you go 3 weeks from now, it'll be a different look, but you'll like the new look a little bit better. So go to primalbeef.com, place your order. You're going to donate to the C4 Foundation when you do that. And then also when the new website is up, we're also got beef jerky that's going to be on there, and then beef sticks as well a few weeks out from that. So trying to give people as many options to get good quality American beef as you possibly can. Because some people, it's crazy to me, but some people don't want to walk around with just like a ribeye in their pocket. So they like beef jerky or beef sticks. So for those people, we got you covered too.
Love that, man. I feel like there should be like Primal Beef Collective, and all you guys should put all your resources together. I mean, maybe that's down the road.
Yeah.
But I feel like all the small ranchers or operations like yours, there should be a collective and just this collaborative kind of joint special operations collective.
It's a very interesting idea, because how else do you really get to be able to be something where you can compete and get the attention of people? Maybe not even compete with the big four, because that's not our goal. If I wanted to compete with the big four, I would have to abandon everything I believe about caring and treating for animals. But how do you get on people's radars and give them enough options? If you're not doing something like that or working in unison, it's a very interesting problem to look at.
Yeah. someone. If only you had a background in leadership.
Yes, if someone out there could figure out how to get this
to
done.
bring people together and do something.
How to build relationships and
a mission.
Influence people.
You got this, man. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. We have a breakout session after this. We're doing the breakout session on what makes a Navy SEAL, and also for our app, the Fieldcraft Survival app. You guys can download it below. It's everywhere apps are found, Fieldcraft Survival, but I'm going to be asking Sean specifically about how he prepares for all these things that are going on in the world. You heard about the sat phone, but we'll go down the rabbit hole a little bit. Like we have with Jocko, Evan, and all the guys, we'll do the same thing with Sean. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Dude, glad to know you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, all the links are down below, primalbeef.com, Echelon Front. You guys can find all the social links as well. Till next time. Peace out, guys.
We all know something's wrong, but who's gonna change it? There's a story.